So I wind that back again, and I say to you in terms of Syria, no, I don't think that is necessarily the case. That may well be allegations of that. No, this is a matter, I think, and I'm very hopeful that what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is with the Americans coming with the United Nations being able to find common ground about dealing with the symptom, so with the cause and not the symptom. The cause is Syria in the first instance, to bring stability there. And once you've got stability there, you can deal with the refugee problem on the one hand, and you can also start dealing with ISIS on the other.
But there is also debate within the America that there was actually only a regime change strategy rather than going after IS or any other terrorist organizations.
Yeah, and I think that is where the United Nations has actually been brought parties together, which has not been easy. Because there is one party that's saying they want to keep the same regime. There's others arguing they want regime change. Epitomising that is Assad. But that has now actually got to be put onto the negotiating table. A solution has got to be found for that issue. And then you've got to go, which I think the world is saying is the enemy, which is ISIS.
But the changing the government within a state is responsibility of the people of the state rather than the United Nations or any other country.
No, I think that's true, except the United Nations have a responsibility, a wider responsibility sometimes. I think if one sees that genocide is being committed, I think in any nation there are responsibilities. Serious decisions, though, that have to be taken. But whilst I broadly accept your thesis on that, I think that is right, but equally so we've got to make sure that the people in those nations have got the right to self-determination, whatever that is, however that is. And that's not always necessary through the democratic process per se. But I think if you find that there is genocide being committed, then I think the world and through the United Nations has some responsibility.
Richard, you use a very beautiful word, self-determination. There's a lot of debate and it's happening, there are some resolution about the Kashmir issue. So what was your view when you were in Parliament, when you were in the European Parliament, about the right of self-determination?
I think that is a disgrace of Kashmir that we have not been able to resolve that. There has been a resolution of the United Nations on record that Kashmir ought to have self-determination. That is there. That is the United Nations position. It's one that I took with my Kashmiri colleagues on many occasions. I took the Labour Party to task on this. When Robin Cook was also Foreign Secretary, I fell out with a lot of my colleagues in the Labour Party and in government that I believe that we had a responsibility to bring both Pakistan and India together to resolve the issue of Kashmir. And that was not. It is better now in Kashmir than it has before. There is some dialogue going on, but is it yet? There is a very clear direction of the United Nations for self-determination of Kashmir, and the two antagonists of that are India and Pakistan, and there ought to be a resolution to that.
So why there are two different level of the execution of the resolution of the United Nations? So sometimes the superpowers or the strong countries go for, say, you should act, these are the resolution. But on the other hand, there are certain resolutions, they are not workable.
And that is the weakness and the strength of the United Nations. It is. I mean, it is very difficult sometimes to be able to continue to deliver everything that what we think the United Nations should be delivering. But I think you asked me specifically on Kashmir. I believe I have a very strong views on Kashmir, but I think Kashmir ought to have the right to self-determination. That is what the United Nations says. That's what the resolution, I can't quote you the resolution now, that is there since about 1947.
Do you think that United Nations needs to be shaked up?
Yes. I think that needs to be revisited. I think the Security Council is out of date. I've said many times, we need a strong United Nations. We need a United Nations that commands respect from around the world, and therefore people can invest in it with some certainty and security. I do not believe that will be the case, while the structure of the Security Council is what it is. I think it's a recipe for the status quo always. But occasionally, I am wrong, and I hope I'm wrong on this particular issue on Syria, that the United Nations, where you've got China and Russia, the US, UK and France, all coming together.
So as a student of political science, very important question, that we have read that everybody is equal in law, that there is no, above in law.
Yeah.
But when we look at the structure of the United Nations, there's a veto power with only with the 5 nations, and the all other nations.
I could not agree with you more. I think a lot of people would agree with you. Is how do you get from point A to point B? And I think there is an overwhelming desire to get to point B, to modernise the United Nations, to be more. That structure of the United Nations represents the power blocks immediately after the war. That's the reality of it.
So what is your plan at the moment for Sheffield? So any good news for Sheffield?
Just before we go to that question, I think that what we saw with the G7, G8 in the economic terms, which I'm very, very pleased that Gordon Brown really instituted G20, which we're seeing now, because it was very similar. The big economic blocs determine the world's future through the G8. But then, because of the crisis that was evolving in 2008, and I think Gordon Brown has never been given the credit for this, he then moved and took the world from the brink of depression by bringing in the blocks of what we call the BRIC countries and the wider G20. And that, I think, was very important. And I hope something similar will happen to the United Nations. So that's my view on the global issue. On my great city of Sheffield, which I love dearly, I think it's going through a renaissance. I think that we are using the assets of our great city, not only its people, but also its 2 great universities, its great teaching hospital, one of only 4 children's hospital, and a great further education system we have here. I think that we're showing how we can bring that partnership together and how we can use knowledge, not only for knowledge and indeed enjoying knowledge, but also how we can translate that into jobs, into wealth creation, into a major part of our economy that's making us very competitive. We see the new innovation district that's emerging around high-value manufacturing, around what we're doing on the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre. All of that is done with the cooperation, indeed the proactive moves of our great universities and our teaching hospital. And I think that's how we will help to rebalance the British economy from, 11% of GDP is manufacturing. We need to move that up nearer to the Germans at 20%. And we need to do that with the support and the power of our universities and our people, our trade unions and the private sector as well.
And what's happening in Don Valley?
Don Valley, is taking some of our traditional values as sport and moving them into a modern setting where we are revamping that. We've got our new athletics track at Woodburn Road, where I believe that's quite successful now. But also, I think more importantly, down at the old Don Valley, which is now called the Olympic Legacy Park, is to bring education, where we've now got a secondary school, a through school from 2 to 16, where we're going to have a University Technical College in the next 12 months, operating with 600 young people, 14 to 16, all around wellness and well-being, and effectively creating the workforce of the future, where we're linking that to the English Institute for Sport, where we're going to build a new stadium there, which will be a state-of-the-art, where not only will we have professional rugby, but it'll be used by the school, by the University Technical College and the community. But right in the middle of that will be this great jewel, which is going to be called the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre, which is bringing some of the best brains of the university and the medical professions together to see how we can start tackling some of the big issues around the whole wellness of Sheffield and hopefully then wider. That's why Toshiba, Westfield and that have now become major partners in that project.
Have you written any book or any thoughts that you are going to write something?
I haven't had time to write a book, but it does, as I've gone on and I've been very, very privileged to do a lot of things in politics. I have met some great people, and I said earlier that I was in the anti-apartheid movement, and I've had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela on many occasions. I sat with Willie Brandt and Barbara Castle. So I've sat with, had access to and indeed met many of the leaders around the world and had those experiences. So therefore, who knows, I might write a book one day.
And what's about the golf?
The golf is terrible. It's a bit like my football team, Sheffield United. We're both going through a crisis at the moment. My handicap and Sheffield United's ability to be able to win football matches as well. So I must get more practice on the golf course, and Sheffield United's got to get better in winning matches.
And what is your message for Sheffielders?
My message for Sheffield is I think that we have a very bright future. I think that what we will see emerging in 2016 are some great announcements on development of our innovation district. I am fairly confident now that the city centre will become one of the, I think, exemplars of city centres for the future as our plans start emerging. I think with our two great universities and the way that they have gone right up the league table, I'm very pleased that Sheffield University is now the second engineering university in the country. It's in the top 100 universities of the world. And we have now got the third, I think it is the third largest teaching university and the second largest teaching hospital in the country as well. We've got great assets, great people, and I think working together, Sheffield has a very bright future.
And in terms of any thing you want to say that Sheffield should achieve this, any vision you have for Sheffield?
Yeah, I think we need to continue to develop the universities on the innovation district. I still think that we've got some great opportunities to build great sense of excellence down there that will be world beating. I think things like the orthopedic side of our health service, I think we are world beaters. We need the world's leading orthopedic hospital. I think that is something that needs to be discussed. I think we need to do a lot more on materials and linking that in together. I think there's great future for that. I think on our connectivity with Manchester and Leeds, we need to have the centre to centre. We need to have HS3 and HS2 right in the heart of the centre of Sheffield and linking those together and working with our colleagues and partners in those great cities of Manchester and Leeds and the conurbations. That is our next stage. We've got to bring that together. As they did with Crossrail in London, we want the Crossrail of the North.
Richard, you have travelled a lot, so because you have seen different political system. So which system you say that this is the system is best in my eyes? Because you have seen the Switzerland system, you have seen European system, you have seen Asian democracy, you have seen Gulf. So which system you like most?
I like the British system because, and you may well disagree with me here, but I think it can get things done. And that because it's an adversarial system and the winner takes all. Now, you may well argue, and some will argue, and it's got some substances, that you can have a government that only has a third of the population supporting it, because that's the way the system worked. As against what I worked in Europe, because I worked in Europe there, which was the consensus system, which was proportional representation in ways, and that was much more of a consensual system. Ours is very adversarial. The two red lines down the House of Commons are the two sword lengths. As they said, that epitomises that. It's same in law as well, the adversarial system. But I think you can actually get things done with the adversarial system. And I think that some may well argue against that in terms of the consensus that is necessary. So,
a lot of politicians talk about the reforms within the House of Lords.
Yeah.
So, do you agree or disagree with this point?
No, I think there needs to be fundamental reforms on there. It needs to be reduced considerably. The second thing, it needs to have accountability. And my personal view is that ought to represent all the regions and the devolved administrations of Scotland and Wales in there in equal proportion, not be dominated by the South East and London, and that they ought to be representatives of their regions. So they're not at the prerogative of the Prime Minister or anybody else, that they represent the regions. They don't take away the democratic legitimacy of the House of Commons.
So it means they should come through elections rather than selections or nominations?
They could, well, there's many ways in which you can do that, to be representative of their area in a reforming chamber, which the House of Lords is, and you need a reforming chamber, I believe, for legislation, and you need some checks and balances on the House of Commons and that. But I believe that the election that takes place and elects the House of Commons, it is supreme. Around that you build, I think, a bank of knowledge and experience and expertise that can help the legislative process. And I think that that ought to be much more widespread across the United Kingdom, not dominated in London and the South East, and therefore representative of the regions and the devolved administrations.
And in terms of anything you want to say to the public who are watching today's show?
I just think that I hope society will be able to, and this is internationally as well. I'm a great believer in the democratic process. I'm a great believer in internationalism, and I have an abiding faith that there is more good in people than there is wrong. And I just think it is we as human beings that need to be able to manage our societies where the best of that is brought out of our human being. And we do need, as Willy Brandt said in his reports on the North-South dialogue, we do need to get better redistribution, both globally and in our nation states, where we give young people every opportunity to realise their potential. That can be done. I believe it should be done. And I think we on institutions ought to start making that happen in a much more effective way. With the technology that's at our disposal now, it must be easier, not harder to do that. It seems to be harder because we make it harder. It ought to be a lot easier to do that. So I do believe we need to have a fairer society, and we need to one that tolerates and has tolerance for one another. And I believe that that would then make it sure that we'd have a much fairer and kinder world.
In charitable projects, do you support any charity or any foundation or anything?
Very much so. The Wasco Brown I support, and the president of that. I am also the president of the Youth Hostel Association. I also sit on the Football Foundation. These are all charitable organisations that do a huge amount for the various elements and constituencies which they affect. So I'm a great believer in charitable work. I think it brings the best out of people, but it also allows them, the individual that's in there, to realise their talents as well and make a contribution to society.
And in terms of University of Sheffield, you have mentioned that. Have you delivered any lectures there because of your experience, especially in political scenario and especially your vision about the European Parliament?
Yeah, I've done lectures over the years at both Hallam University and Sheffield University on various aspects of, well, it's been winning Olympic Games or on proportional representation or debated in many forms. So yeah.
If any university in Pakistan will be interested or in India, do you want to visit them and deliver your lectures?
I'd love to deliver a lecture. Yeah, I'd love to do that, and whatever they would want to do that. And I'm a great believer in the Commonwealth as well. I think the Commonwealth is a great institution. You never bring the Commonwealth together now in the 21st century. But I think there are certain institutions that we are very proud. I think the British Council, I think the Commonwealth itself, I think the BBC are institutions that we ought to treasure and indeed protect if they come under attack.
Have you visited Asian countries?
Yeah, quite a lot of Asian countries, yeah. I've been obviously to India, I've been to Pakistan. Well, I was trade minister, so I was a trade minister, sports minister, so that has took me to many countries around the world.
So which city you like in Asia most?
Which city in Asia? Well, that's a good question. It depends what you want. I mean, I think Singapore is fantastic. I think that when I was in Malaysia, I think I've been in Delhi. I think Beijing is a fascinating. So it depends what you want. I mean,
and your favorite food?
My favourite food, I suppose, really, let me just think about that. I think it is, dare I say this, I'll probably get slaughtered for this, but I do like Italian food. I do like Italian food.
And in terms of your favourite sport?
My favourite sport has got to be football. I'm a runner. I run quite a lot. I'm running this weekend in a 10K run. So I run every weekend, and some in races and some just for pleasure. But the sport I love to watch is football.
Richard, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. And in coming days, we will request Richard again because there are so many other things which we need to discuss with Richard. Keep watching Sheffield Live. Thank you.